Hey, hey, long time no see. I know it's only been a couple days, but basically what I'm gonna do is give you a quick intro to V-Ray for Rhino and just kind of go over some of the things we're gonna need for Project 3 here. So basically I have this file. This is the file you've seen me model and cage edit in, right? So we have our very wacky thing we've made, and we have like our camera set and all that stuff already. Um, I'm just gonna basically show you how to use V-Ray. So you guys' computers should have V-Ray on it. You can also download a free trial for your personal device, um, which might be helpful if you have a pretty sweet device. But basically, what you can do is use V-Ray as a better renderer than Rhino. And so there's a whole lot that goes into V-Ray. There is literally like 4 hours of content about V-Ray on my channel. Look for the two videos titled Feat Chris Wall for more like in-depth stuff, but that stuff's a little more helpful for studio. I'm just going to show you the basics. So essentially, you'll have this V-Ray button up in your Rhino. What you want to do is you're going to click on it and hit Asset Editor, and it opens V-Ray. If for some reason you don't have this, that means that your renderer is not set to Rhino. And so what you can do, you can go to Render, Current Renderer. It's probably like one of these two Rhino renders. You just click on V-Ray and that like preloads it in. So you open the Asset Editor, and this is kind of your setup, right? So sometimes it'll pop up just like this. It'll have a bunch of buttons. This button right here, the little teapot, renders whatever view you're in, right? So if I like click that in here, what you'll see is it generates a PNG of the objects that you have, right? And so sometimes this can take a little bit, just depending. You can see kind of loading down on the bar down there. This is just like a default 800 by 450. There's also, if you click this little drop down, this is a render that updates as you make edits, like an interactive render. So that's something where you can kind of see it updating as you kind of like move stuff around and play with stuff. And that can be super helpful. You'll also have access to the Chaos Cosmos library, which we probably won't get into this semester, but you may find use for it in Studio. More on that in the videos featuring my dear friend Chris Wall on the channel that you can look up. Um, but I digress. Basically, if you click these little side buttons, they open different parameters and options for these different things. So I don't know what your default is. It's probably medium. If you are using a school computer, you probably only have like a CPU option. But if you have like a personal computer that has a good graphics card, you can switch that over to RTX. It'll render a little faster. Um, Turn this on to high, turn your denoiser on, and what that does, that gets rid of the little like pixelations. And then essentially what you have here is just like a bunch of settings. You can play with these if you want, like the exposure value and stuff, depending on like that will change the exposure, how much light is being thrown in, white balance, depth of field, effects. We're going to go down to render output though. We're going to change the aspect ratio to custom. And we're going to make this 1.85 to 1. And so once you set that, as long as this button is linked, oh, it already changed, 1.85 to 1. Make sure that's linked like that. And then we can make this a little bigger, let's say like 1280. And so that will keep that aspect ratio. Now you might want to do a little higher res for your renders, maybe more like 2000. I always thought that was like a nice sweet spot. Um, but really that you can just like play around with these settings. And so you can like throw your asset editor off to the side. I'm going to move it to my second screen out of the way. And then in your model, you'll see like right now we just have kind of like a skylight going. So what we have here is like, oh, that actually doesn't exist anymore. We have just like our Rhino document sun on, and so like that is kind of like the default light. But what we can do is go into our Rhino file, go up to the V-Ray panel, go down to lights, and go to directional light. And so I can just like drop this in, and like the name suggests, the direction the arrow points, you're going to get a lot of light. And so I have my rendered view down in this bottom left corner right here, right? And so when I drop this in, it washes this thing out with light, right? And that's because this directional light is pretty bright. It adds a lot of brightness and intensity to this. So it's really close. What I can do is I can just back this up. I can even start to rotate it away a little bit. You can see how it starts to like cast those shadows. Um, what's crazy is that for me, that's actually like one of the very low intensities. So I can like type in like 0.25, maybe something a little less intense. Um, and so what you can do is essentially if you have a directional light in here, and you make a copy of it like that, any settings you change for one is going to be the same for the other, if that makes sense. So if you want to have two separate lights, what you can do is you can just go down to the V-Ray, lights, directional light, and draw a second one. Maybe have it face a different direction. And maybe this one you want up a little brighter, but maybe farther away. I like to think about it as like when you're taking a photo at the photo booth, like we talked about, how normally there's those two LED lamps on either side. I think about your directional lights as um, your two LED lamps, and you can like move them around and rotate them as needed. I actually don't think the distance from the object matters that so much as the actual angle of the light. So like obviously if this like falls behind a certain way, then I actually don't even think the location matters. It's just the angle at which the light is coming from. It would basically picture like an entire plane of arrows happening all at once. Um, that is, it's kind of like how the rays of the sun hit the earth. It's not just like hitting one point on the earth. It's actually more like a constant plane of light hitting the whole surface of the earth at once. So that's like kind of what this is mimicking. But what we could do is we could turn one of these like way down and then maybe make the other one just slightly brighter, maybe like a 0.4 and like a 0.01. And so we can start to just like play around with some of the shading effects of this. And so you'll see right now, this is just like blank texture. Now, as we learn from our rocks, we can do, I'll just quickly bring in one of our old friends, the seamless textures. Now you're going to be making your own textures. I'm not making a video on that because it is essentially the exact same thing it is literally actually the exact same thing we've already done, and I didn't want to waste your guys' time giving you an extra video to watch. But I'm just gonna grab one of these. Just you can essentially drop it on any object you want. Um, or you could apply it to a layer, just like the same techniques we've already looked at. Um, but what is I think nice with V-Ray is V-Ray also, you're not going to be using these for this project, but for Studio with this library, there's like a whole um, asset library in the Chaos Cosmos that you can like drag objects in. And what's really helpful about that, like all these different things are in here. You have to kind of download them to use them, which is a little unfortunate. Um, but that can be really helpful for Studio. Uh, for that, you just need to have a different layer for each type of material that you want to use. And I think just as a rule, you'll want to do that with this project as well. But basically you can like start to get your view set up and you'll have your textures going, texture or textures, depending on how you're doing it. And you can scale those and box map them the same way that you did with your rocks. And then what we can do is bring in the 3D entourage. And so again, this Chaos Cosmos has some stuff in there, but we're actually not going to use that for this project. We've had some problems with that in the past. And also that stuff is a little too realistic. So what we've done is we have kind of put together a little bit of a um, asset library for you guys to use, right? So we can grab like plants or people or furniture. You can download anything in here. I'm actually uploading like a whole rendering package as well. It's going to take another hour. But once that gets on there, you guys can basically download from that. I've put that link on Carmen under the modules. And there's a V-Ray assets module that is now listed that you can basically just copy that link in your browser. It'll take you right to that Google Drive file. But so I just like downloaded a sofa, right? Just like I use the import settings, throw that in here. And it looks like it comes in really huge, which is super funny. And because this thing is like a mesh, it's going to read kind of strange in our view, but once we render it, it will look fine. So we're going to scale this down. You're going to want to scale your objects in your space. And so I'm just going to do a real rough scale. Oh, that's not even the right box. Here we go. So that still looks like kind of so huge. And so you may need to like shear some of these objects or rotate them in a certain way. Um, it's just going to vary so wildly from project to project. So like that is like shearing it in one direction. Uh, but this is like very rough, obviously. And it reads as black because there's so many little lines. You see all these little poly surfaces. That's not going to look like that when we render it. But maybe I grabbed a bad block as an example. But we're just going to kind of like throw this in here as our little example model, right? Just maybe we can squeeze that a little closer. There we go. Bring it forward a little bit. And so as we remember from the side, these things are going to look really ridiculous, but it's about making it look correct in the front view. So you just play around with it. It's like, oh, there's a weird tilted chair. There's people, there's plants, entourage, all kinds of stuff that you can add to these. They're really fun. But then, yeah, let's like bring back our V-Ray and cook a model, see what this starts to look like. So this will take like a while, but we can start to see like, oh, this chair is like causing some shadows to happen. There's like some shading happening. And so it's like if I don't like the lighting there, what I can do is start to mess with these point lights again. And it's like maybe this needs to have kind of a different view on there so I can like stop that and I can like recook it and really even just getting a look at this like very first lighting pass to see what's happening. It looks like that actually was so crazy bright it literally didn't render anything. Um, and so that like shining that light directly on it actually is like very not good for it, it looks like. So we can run that again. Oh, I'm sorry. I was clicked in the wrong window. You have to be clicked in the correct window for this to work. Um, so make sure you're in your correct window and then you can try rendering again. And every pass it does is gonna like fill in these pixels. But yeah, just while that is cooking, it does look a little dark. And so um what we can do is start to play with all kinds of different settings and you can add like more directional lights or bump up the intensity. Maybe I want this light to be a little brighter. We actually did turn it down. It's only like 0.1 right now. Even just 0.5 might blow this thing to a crazy bright color. So let's see. It kind of takes a lot of effort to stop one of these renders once it's started. So let's just cook that again, see if that lightened up at all. And you'll have textures and fun objects and um, it's a lot of kind of experimentation that can get a little tedious at times. It's not a perfect system. Something else you can add is something called a dome light, right? So we can go to V-Ray, lights, dome light. We can like drop one of these in as well. Oh, and so I don't know if it works like this in 8 as well, but you need to like download something. So there's these things called HDRIs. They're kind of like backgrounds. And so uh, let's look through all of the assets in V-Ray material library. Uh, HDRI. Oh, you know what? It's called Studio. Someone has like recreated studio lighting. Um, and there's like a couple variations of it, which is like kind of what we try to create at the photo booth. So you can start to like if you downloaded one of these, um, it will make you sign in with an account. I don't know if it's gonna let me. I'm doing this in my second monitor. I, it looked like it did. So now it says it's downloaded, so I can load this in right here, right? And let's say I just like drop this on my, oh, you go to your dome light and you go to this button right here, this like texture slot, and you can essentially add in uh, your dome light. I think I can just drag it actually. Paste this copy. There we go. And so now I have this dome light in here that can start to affect what we got. And so let's see what this looks like when we render. Might get a little too crazy. Yep, that is just a little too intense. So yeah, you'll start to, it's a little overwhelming. You can get like way too many, uh, way too many lights and windows cooking at once. Um, but it really is more of like a trial and error kind of thing, trying to like get the lighting right. And so it looks like this is just maybe a little too intense. And so we're just gonna keep playing around with it. What we may have to do is delete one of our directional lights if we wanted to use a dome light, just to make sure. Uh, run it again. Oh, you know what? I've clicked in the wrong window again. Oh my gosh, so sorry. Um, and so that looks a little dark, and I can bring this over. So this is like starting to hopefully mimic the studio kind of environment, but it still looks a little dark. So maybe we up the intensity of it. And it's like that is a little insane, right? It's getting a little bright, but you can see how it's like casting this shadow. Um, so I would say that's like too bright, but we're starting to like cook a little bit. It is literally the renders are literally cooking. I'm not even meaning that as like a like funny slang joke, but yeah, it's really fun to mess with. Like obviously the shadows being cast from like the ceiling onto this thing and making it darker. I might have just grabbed a bad object, but um this is kind of the idea of V-Ray is just like it's a pretty intense renderer. There is seriously so much that can go into it. And you get in or you get out what you put into it. And so I'm going to link also a helpful YouTube collection of a guy on the internet who's really good with a lot of this stuff, as well as obviously on the channel, there's like a couple hours of V-Ray content for some more realistic renderings that I would love for you guys to check out just on your own time. It might serve you well, but in the end, you end up having this like very nice. Um, my texture had a watermark in it. I'm just seeing, but um, this render ended up having a very nice, like it's crisp. You can save like a current channel, which is just like saving a PNG of it, save it wherever you want. One final thing about channels is you can, I forget which setting it is off the top of my head. It was something I clicked on over here. Here we go. If you do, this just will be helpful potentially in the next phase when we do some Photoshop. But if you do this material random color um, and export it like this, what this does is every separate object is kind of given a random color. And you're like, Nathan, that doesn't help me. Why would I want it to be a random color? And that's the neat part is that you don't. But what it's super helpful for is in Photoshop, you essentially would put your PNG that you rendered in Photoshop. Then you would copy this into that file. It overlays it. And what that allows you to do is what you can do from layer to layer is just like quick select objects that in your original PNG maybe have like a wide range of color because of the texture or the shadows or whatever, but you can grab just this one object as a selection and then go to the other layer and your selection is still there in Photoshop and um maybe like bring up the bright like if I wanted to mess with this chair right here, I would have like a blue object outline or something and I would select that in Photoshop, like the blue object that's blank, and then I could edit just the chair by bringing it out. So that could be like a helpful side tool. I actually learned about these very recently, and they're kind of fun. But yeah, so there is a ton to play with. It's kind of a crash course. There's going to be a lot of questions, but that's what your friends are for, the GAs are for, and I am for. So um, we will crank through this together and it will be really fun. So that being said, let me know if you have any questions and we will keep going. You guys are doing great.